So there I was, the mid-90s, back in the United States, and I go into a Toys R Us, and I'm looking around, just trying to get my bearings. I see the Star Trek stuff from Playmates. I see a few other toy lines I'm not that familiar with. And then I look down, and what do I see? Something called Beast Wars Transformers. And Optimus Prime was a gorilla. Beast Wars landed in the mid-90s, and I was a teenager going into high school, and I was aging out of collecting modern toys while wanting to still dabble in the re-released Star Wars stuff, and also just go to toy aisles and just see what was going on. And I distinctly remember seeing those Beast Wars toys on the pegs and on the shelves at Toys R Us and other stores, but I never once had any interest to pick them up. Part of that was my age. Part of that was the fact that my interests in Transformers in the 80s, as you know, were quickly derailed by the Transformers movie and just the general difficulty with the toys at the time. I always really liked the idea of the Transformers, the more than meets the eye, hiding in plain sight aspect of them. I thought that was brilliant. As a kid, that really did fascinate me. Beast Wars was off my radar entirely. I did catch the cartoon occasionally when I was flipping channels, but I was normally flipping by it to get to Mystery Science Theater or something like that. And it didn't really hold a lot of appeal for me. The main reason being that, and again, I freely admit that I have yet to watch the Beast Wars show. I have promised Lio Convoy that I'm going to. Now that I am 30 years removed from it and can watch it truly objectively with different experiences, I'll have an authentic take. As a teenager who was a kid with the original G1 Transformers, though, I felt like this whole exercise made no sense because animals like the Dinobots had already been in the line. And the Dinobots, while they were funny to watch and they were entertaining on the show, they really broke the whole hiding in plain sight thing. They looked like big robotic dinosaurs. They did not look like actual dinosaurs. So Beast Wars, trying to make that attempt again en masse, was a very strange thing. My immediate perspective was, there's no way that a robot can turn into an animal and be a convincing, photorealistic, organic animal in plain sight. And while there was cutting-edge CGI animation in the show, both the show and the toys didn't lend themselves to that idea. The show didn't have the animation to pull that off, and the toys didn't have the engineering or the physics to pull that off. And you can see that just putting them next to G1 Autobots. When you transform an Autobot into the car, no matter how janky the robot looks because of the primitive transformation technology at the time, the car looks like a real die-cast high-end model car. You can sit that on your shelf in your bedroom, and anybody that's not familiar with Transformers may not notice that that's actually a robot. You can't really say the same thing about these. Lio was kind enough to send me the first wave of the re-released vintage Beast Wars line from Hasbro with the Kenner logo on the boxes and everything like that. So this was my first opportunity to really dig into the vintage Beast Wars line. Given this is my first foray into Beast Wars and I don't have nearly the original entire run of the toys, I'm using re-releases of the vintage toys, sort of, tribute retro reissues, and because I have yet to see the series, I'm sure for you Beast Wars experts, this assessment might be amusing, but just go with me on this because this is an authentic reaction from somebody who otherwise has no experience with these toys or this lore. In this assortment that Lio sent me, I have Optimus Primal, I have Megatron, I have Cheetor, who I'm constantly trying not to call Cheeto, and I have Rat Trap. If the back of the boxes are accurate, I have 3 good guys, Maximals, and 1 Predacon, Megatron. I do find it amusing that they didn't bother to try and change Megatron's name. They changed everybody else's name, but Megatron is just Megatron, even when he's a T-Rex. whatever. Because I don't have firsthand experience with the vintage 90s original toys, I don't know how accurate or similar these are to those as far as the quality of their construction. I know that aesthetically, they are recreations of those toys. They look similar in a photograph. But as far as their joints, for example, the joints in these toys are quite loose. And I don't know if that's the way it was in the mid-90s with the originals. But that is one issue with these toys, is that they have very loose joints when transformed into their robot modes, with Optimus Primal being the worst of the bunch. Before you start thinking that I'm just gonna hate on these this entire video, let me be clear. There's a lot I really like conceptually about these toys. I love the imagination that goes into their designs. I love anything that tries to get kids more positively interested in animals, because animal cruelty is still an epidemic problem throughout humanity going back millennia, and anything that will get kids interested in animals in a positive way, for me, is a big win. I really like the colors on them. I like the way they tried to interpret these designs from the robot characters in the G1 to now the robot characters in sort of this beast mode. And I gotta say, the line is daring. It is extremely daring. They took the risk of putting the audience for these at arm's length, for better or worse. And with some figures, they've really knocked it out of the park here in this grouping. With other figures, I think it's still just as janky as it ever was. The creativity is both admirable and disturbing at the same time. So for example, Rat Trap, when he goes into his robot mode, the rat's brain is the top of the robot's head, which is really messed up if you think about it. And while my eyes could be playing tricks on me, I think Cheetor's intestines are actually designed into one of his weapons. Rat Trap is a solid little figure. He does look weird with his rat feet sticking out on either side of him like he's directing traffic at a crossing. But I do really like his alt mode. I think the rat looks really good. Cheetor, or as I affectionately like to refer to him, Cheeto, his robot mode doesn't really work for me. I don't like that huge cat head sticking out of the front of him because it actually obscures his robot face completely. I looked in the instructions a million times, and that's apparently the way it's supposed to be. Cheetor is gonna have a real problem in combat, or just walking down a hiking trail, or getting out of bed, because that head obscures his view. However, I do want to point out that these characters are worlds ahead of the G1 figures in terms of articulation and posability. And when you consider that this was only the mid-90s, that makes these Beast Wars figures very impressive in that regard. And that extends into the larger deluxe ones, Optimus Primal and Megatron. Let's start with Megatron. He is a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Obviously, the creators of this show were trying to evoke a kind of Godzilla versus King Kong motif when they made Optimus a giant silverback gorilla and they made Megatron this T-Rex reptilian creature thing. For me, Megatron represents everything that is unappealing about the Beast Wars line. His alt mode as a T-Rex doesn't work very well. It's not very convincing because he's got these huge hip panels that are always popping out, and he's not very posable in that mode. And then when he's in the robot mode, it just looks like they did their best to try and get a head between the T-Rex head and the T-Rex tail, which become his arms and hands, which do nothing to help the versatility of this action figure. Megatron just looks dumb. I said it. I know that it's very imaginative and very creative engineering. I'm not denying that. But between his big hip pouch launcher, blade things, and the big T-Rex head on one hand, well, it is one hand, with the water sprayer, and then the tail kind of becoming this large, kind of like, almost like crocodile hand. I don't like anything about Megatron in his robot mode. His alt mode as a Tyrannosaurus Rex is not a complete disaster, but it is the weakest of the alt modes for all four of these figures. Which brings us to Optimus Primal. Now, Optimus Primal suffers more than any of these others with the loose joints thing. This may be just the example that I got out of the box, but it may be an endemic problem with the Hasbro reissues of Beast Wars, or it may be completely accurate to the way they were in the 90s. Optimus Primal is the one I remember most from my first visual encounter with these at toy stores. He was the first one I ever saw and the one that stuck in my mind. He comes with a bevy of weapons, including a double-bladed sword, including a mace and chain, and he has these missile launchers that seem seem really cool as they flip up over his shoulders, but they actually flip back in his alt mode to become his haunches. And when you're trying to pose the alt mode gorilla, those things keep coming loose and flipping back over the gorilla's shoulders. You can't ever keep them latched down. So it's constantly getting in your way, which was really frustrating. One of the many examples of a gimmick that sounds great in concept, but doesn't quite work in practice with the actual toy. Now, as a robot, the missile launchers are great. They're a lot of fun. But when you're trying to use the alt mode, those missile launchers are not fun at all. I don't really know what to call them, so I just started calling them haunch launchers, or Death from the Haunches 2.0. In their robot modes, both Optimus and Megatron have these kind of weird insectoid war masks that they can put on, but I just prefer to keep their more traditional robot faces exposed. I don't really understand yet, because I haven't seen the show, what those more insectoid reptilian looking alien Guyver looking masks are, so best for my display to just leave them out. Optimus also has this very awkward action gimmick which never works right. I can't figure out after working with it for an hour how to get it to properly function. But I think the idea is that he's supposed to be able to do the King Kong chest pounding thing like most gorillas do in movies. But unfortunately, if you can configure it to actually function, it just results in him doing this weird back and forth motion like he's getting started on a big musical number.
Well, you got trouble, my friend. Right here, I say trouble right here in River City.
If I had to sum up Beast Wars from this initial encounter, I would say that these are highly creative and imaginative toys. And I like the fact that they took a chance on these back in the day, because toy companies don't do that now. These are indicative of a time when toys were still strong in the marketplace and they could take some risks. And these are some very risky toys. I like the positive animal stuff that's in it. And I like their alt modes, barring the T-Rex. The T-Rex is okay, he's not a disaster, but the other animal alt modes are great. However, like I said before, these are Transformers that for me don't meet the litmus test of more than meets the eye, hides in plain sight. These are Transformers for people who love animals in any depiction, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that get a kick out of them. I'm not quite sure I'm there with it. I like the concept, I like the message, I like the creativity. I don't really like the end aesthetics. I don't think these robots look very good. That's just me. They're very creative, but they're not something where I look at them and go, ooh, I want to display all of these. Now in their alt modes, that's a different story. Even though they don't hide in plain sight nearly as well as the G1 cars do on a display shelf, they are still enjoyable to look at and know that they are trying to depict some awesome beastie from nature. So please don't misunderstand me and think I'm trying to throw Beast Wars under the bus here. There's a lot to like here, and there's a lot that's really weird. And if you were objective about it, you'll see that too. It's okay to be into something that's weird. Just be ready to observe it and be okay with it. Beast Wars is a bizarre toy line, and I'm glad they took the brave departure from the original G1. It's just a shame that they couldn't quite stick the landing with the hiding in plain sight from robot to animal. All that said though, all sins with Beast Wars can be forgiven, because... Monkey!